Welcome to Jazz Zone Together, our new online jazz community providing educational and classroom resources and interviews with artists, celebrities, and jazz educators, as well as valuable teaching tips and repertoire suggestions. Today, we welcome Ray Smith, professor of saxophone at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, and also internationally known jazz performer and adjudicator. Now I'll bring in Dick Dunscomb to conduct the interview with Ray. Dick, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. I am so excited today to have this opportunity to speak with Dr. Ray Smith. I've been a long-time admirer of yours, Ray, so welcome to Jazz Zone Together.
Well, thank you. I'm an admirer of yours as well.
Being located in Utah and me being located more in the eastern part of the country, we haven't been really that close, but your work is just incredible. And I know that a lot of people in this part of the country even know about you through the wonderful Brigham Young University big band synthesis, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let's start out and have you tell us how it all began for Ray Smith.
Well, I think really it goes back to the seventh grade Fathers and Sons night. And the high school jazz band came over and performed for the dinner that they had at the junior high. And I'd never heard anything like that. I was just thrilled. I knew if I could hear it now, it probably wasn't very good, but it just thrilled me at the time. And then I got really interested. In ninth grade, my band director at the junior high school decided to start a little jazz band after school. I'd been playing clarinet since the fourth grade. I picked up the alto and I started to play in this little group. And he'd rehearse after school, but he was using the old stock dance band charts. So they were real charts, and it'd have four measures rest changed to clarinet. It's like, yeah, I can do that. And then pretty soon it'd be like 8 measures rest changed to flute. Flute? I got to play the flute. So between 9th and 10th grade year, I started playing the flute and working on the flute. By the time I was a junior, I won the state fair and so on the flute, playing the Mozart. Studied with the principal flute at the Utah Symphony, and I was also studying with the principal clarinetist at the Utah Symphony. And I was pretty serious about all my classical studies during that time. There really was no saxophone teachers around here at the time. There was nobody like me that I could call and say, hey, could I study jazz with you or could I study saxophone with you? And so I was pretty much self-made. Even through my undergraduate studies, there was no saxophone teacher. In fact, you may be interested to know that I'm the first saxophone teacher ever at Brigham Young University. To give you some perspective. And so I went through there as the clarinet major. But I also worked a lot on the flute during that time, and I also did some oboe and bassoon work quite a bit through that time. So anyway, finally went to graduate school, where I had the great privilege of studying with Dr. Eugene Rousseau. For the first time, got some classical saxophone help and some real help on the saxophone. And then, of course, I was also privileged to work with David Baker and played in David Baker's band, also Dominic Sparrow's band, and worked with a lot of wonderful people at Indiana University. And so I've had a real blessing of having some great people in my life. But I think it was all sparked by that exposure in the seventh grade. By the way, in the 10th grade, I got to hear Stan Kenton's band live. And I was just thrilled. I mean, it was a dance in Salt Lake, but and of course I wasn't there with anybody or dancing. I was just standing in the back like a fly on the wall, but tears running down my cheeks. I was just so thrilled with what was going on. I thought, I've got to play with a band like this.
Really? Well, that's some interesting stops along the way, and the idea of being encouraged with all of that without a saxophone, a person to help you through a lot of that makes it even more admired. And
I should say, Dick, that I went to the summer jazz camps when I was in high school. The old Ken Morris summer stage band camps. Jamie, of course, has taken those things over now. And that's where I first met Jamie. We've been good friends ever since. But and I'm glad that Jamie's still doing a little bit with that. But that was my only education, jazz education, really, was going to those week-long summer jazz camps. And when I was between my junior and senior years in high school, I went to 5 weeks of those camps around the country. That's how much I loved it. But I was able to rub shoulders with a lot of wonderful people at those camps too. And I have to say that that was an important part, because I could learn enough in a week to work for a year on my own quite a bit. I mean, it would have been better to have a regular teacher, but it was good.
Those were inspirational for me as well. I attended many of those at Indiana University.
Oh, yeah.
We may have even crossed paths and not known it at that time. But you're right. I mean, it was incredible, and just to be in the same place with those kind of musicians, it was inspirational.
Yeah, yeah.
We talked a little bit, or I mentioned a little bit in the intro about your wonderful synthesis big band. I mean, it's been such a professional standard throughout the years that everybody is awed by it. I'm wondering how can you keep that level of professionalism going, and then maybe share some highlights that you've had with that group.
Yeah. Well, I don't really know how to answer that, other than I guess I'm so darn ornery. If it ain't right, it ain't right. And I insist on getting it right. You know, I will say this. I teach correct principles. I think that if I can get the band to start thinking for themselves based on good principles, then a lot of the work gets done. And so I try to teach good principles, but then I also insist on that standard. And last year was a good test of that. I lost everybody. We toured Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic summer of 2019 with a band, and the band was just at a really peak level. And then we came back, and we only had I think it was 3 or 4 people left in the band. And all of a sudden, for the first time, I mean, you really can't get in the band as a freshman typically, but all of a sudden we had a whole crop of freshmen in the band, and it was like really starting from scratch. But I did the teaching. I do that. That's what our gig is, right? I did the job. You know, I worked hard and I taught, and the band responded to that, and we had a great year. In fact, we were having such a good semester last winter semester. We started with the BYU Trumpet Festival. We played with Sean Jones and Doc Severinsen. That was such a kick. And the band really rose to the occasion. And then shortly after that, we had our jazz festival, and we had the Marcus Roberts Trio there with Jason Marcellus and so on. And the band really rose to that. That was a blast. And then we had the New York Voices there. That was such a kick, working with Darman Meter and his wonderful charts, and the group was just phenomenal. And that really became the highlight for the year last year, when all of a sudden we had a couple of more concerts, but all of a sudden we were shut down because of the virus. But that was a great climax at the New York Voices, and that was with a very young band, but the band really smoked. So I was pleased, and I think it's just we have to teach the right things, and then we have to insist on what we need. I see a lot of people that will teach, and they'll teach the principle well, and then they don't really follow through on it. They let it go. I've done my job. I haven't, and then they don't really go through and insist that they get what they want.
Well, a lot of our viewers will be jazz educators for this series that we're doing. And so I want to ask you a question about travel. I know that you've been all over the world with synthesis.
Yes.
What is the value behind that, and how do you go about making it happen?
Well, I think there is a great value, musically and culturally, and so on, educationally. It's been really great, and we really have. Well, you were with us at the Montreux Jazz Festival back in 1988, and it was you that helped us get there, and I really appreciate that so much. Still, we played on the big band night with Jerry Mulligan's New York Big Band, and also Ron McCurdy's band. That was such a kick. Really great experience. But that was a month-long tour in Europe, and since that time we've played in Russia. It really was the USSR when we first went there, and the Baltic states. And we went back later when it was not the when it was when everything had changed, but the Urals and out into Siberia. We were in Novosibirsk, and that was quite a Spartan trip, but a wonderful, wonderful from a human standpoint. We've been in Scandinavia a couple of times and played in all the countries of Scandinavia, and we played in Japan and China, played in Brazil. We played in a lot of the major jazz festivals of the world at this point, which is really cool because I think there's a great value when the band gets exposed at some of these major jazz festivals. Not only at the Montreux Festival, I think we played there 3 or 4 times now, but all those Spain festivals and England festivals, Birmingham and Wigan Jazz Festival, all those in England, and I shouldn't have started into that because it's too hard to think. Edinburgh Jazz Festival in Scotland. We've played at most of the world's great jazz festivals. Pori Festival in Finland, and the Kongsberg Festival a couple of times in Norway. It's just been really cool to travel, and it's been good for the band because when you get on the road and you play night after night after night, that's a completely different dynamic than doing a concert at the school one night. And so, and the band really grows during that time, and I think it really does help to lift and elevate the band. We're fortunate to have a school that's interested in doing that because they want the band to get out, and so they've got a whole office. We're not the only touring group for the university, and they've got a whole office that takes care of all those tours, so that it hasn't been nearly the burden on me that it might have been if I had to create all those tours by myself. They've got people that will actually go to the country and advance the tour months in advance, and it's been a real support to us. I've had a lot of my peers who have said, "Man, I couldn't do that at my university. I don't know how you do that. What a blessing." But it has been great for the band.
All I can say is, wow. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Now, let's focus on you as a performer. I know that you are equally adept at classical and jazz styles. I find it incredible, as you mentioned earlier, that you are equally at home on flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, and saxophone. Ray, how is that possible?
Well, it isn't possible to play those things every day anymore, all of them anymore. I play pretty much every day, but I can't play all those instruments every day anymore. But after a while of really working at those instruments, you develop a certain flexibility and adaptability that lets you kind of respond to things. I got a call from the Utah Symphony. I play fairly often with the Utah Symphony as an extra, and I got a call to play on their Celtic concert, and I was featured on a whole piece on penny whistle. Well, I had dabbled with the penny whistle some, but to have to play that penny whistle, and I was able to adapt to it quite quickly. And they actually had Joni Madden and Cherish the Ladies. It's one of the phenomenal groups on the second half of the concert. And Joni is like one of the premier penny whistle players, and she came up to me and was very complimentary about my solo piece in the first half. So I was able to adapt to that. It's just but at first it takes a lot of effort. I used to play the flute first every day because I didn't want to practice the flute after I'd spoiled my embouchure with the saxophone and the oboe and the clarinet and so on. That I needed it. But for a long time I played the flute first every day. But then I would. After a while, I said, okay, now I'm starting to get the flute. Let me play the clarinet first and see if I can actually make myself go to the flute. And then for a while, I would practice 10 minutes of clarinet, 10 minutes of flute, 10 minutes of saxophone, 10 minutes of flute, 10 minutes of oboe, 10 minutes of flute, 10 minutes of saxophone, 10 minutes of around so I could get used to adapting. And I've done a lot of pit work and show work, and I'm part of 2 operations that record shows almost nonstop. Of course, it did kind of stop with the virus, but I'm hoping it'll get going again. But Broadway shows, theatrical shows aren't happening a whole lot, but I think they're starting to go again. But we've recorded a whole library of those things where I've had to double like crazy. And so it's a normal day for me to have to respond maybe to calls where I've got to play saxophone, maybe a couple of different saxophones, flute, clarinet, maybe bass clarinet, maybe oboe, maybe something on the bassoon or the English horn, and those. I did make that that was my master's degree and my doctorate was woodwinds performance, And I worked with some of the really great woodwind players at Indiana University. I mean, I mentioned Eugene Rousseau, but Henry Gulick and Bernard Pointenoy and Earl Bates and the clarinet and Kenton Terry and I shouldn't have started into that because I can't think fast enough. But on the flute, 32 years as second flute with the Philadelphia, and I had the privilege of working with him. You know, and Harry Howdeshow is another name, and I worked with Jerry Sruchek on the oboe. Jerry played 20 years with the Chicago. You know, and I studied bassoon with Leonard Sherrill, who Pittsburgh and NBC Orchestra and so on. I mean, I've just been blessed so much to have so many wonderful people in my life that have helped me so much. And then I've tried to work hard. Sometimes I have to actually just think back to that seventh grade time, and it's like, I was just a little kid that grew up on the poor side of the tracks. How did this all happen? Is this really real? You know, some of the wonderful things that have happened to me.
Well, it's really incredible, as you say, that career has taken that path that you've followed. And I know that you've had a tremendous career as a recording artist, doing CDs, movie scores, TV, jingles. Please share some of the highlights of those with our viewers.
Yeah, I lost count somewhere around 220 on the CDs. I know I've done a number since then. I'm not sure. It's over 220 CDs that I've been on, different people, including some of my own. And that's been cool. And I still get calls to do things like that. I got a call. They're coming in a little different now. I got a call from Salt Lake. We've got a tune here that we feel like needs some saxophone stuff on it. Would you be able to put it on? I said, sure. I said, if you want, you can just send me the Pro Tools session, and I'll load it in here. And I recorded all the stuff. I recorded more than I thought they'd really need, so that they can always take out anything they don't want. And I shipped it back as a Pro Tools session. I never thought of it again for quite a while, and then I started working on something. I thought, I wonder if that ever happened. So I called him, and he said, "Oh yeah, here's where you can find it on the iTunes store and so on." And I said, "So did you cut out a lot of stuff?" I said, "No, we used everything you sent. It was wonderful." But I get a little different kind of opportunities sometimes now to do the recording. But I remember on a jingle. They were getting a little flack from the union on how they were doing some things up at LA East. And so they took this project to London to do this. It was a Buick commercial, National Buick commercial. And I got a call on a Saturday late afternoon. Could you come in tonight? I ended up there in the middle of the night. But they said we had the best saxophone player in London, but we just couldn't get from him quite what we wanted. Could you come in and do it? And so I went in really late night, and everything else was done in England, but I put the sax stuff on it. And we were doing jingles not only for, I was on Good Morning America every morning for several years, and things like that. ABC Sports, ABC Monday Night Football, ABC College. In fact, we recorded all the ESPN themes. When you watch a football game and you think you're hearing the college, what do you call it, marching band? No, that's us in Salt Lake. You know, they were shipping them in. They were faxing in the parts, and we were recording all these fight songs for all these universities for ESPN. And yeah, Oprah Winfrey. I was on a lot of these jingles, a lot of Canadian and German cable television. We did a lot of those. They were attracting that work here at LA. You know, I really thought that I'd lost the opportunity, because when I took the job at BYU, I had really been planning to move to New York City. I had recording in my blood. And I really had thought, I'm going to... Well, Harvey Phillips really encouraged me. He'd freelanced in New York for 20 years, wonderful tuba player. And Harvey knew me quite well. In fact, my roommate, Steve Harlow, used to always accompany him. But Harvey and I... In the festival orchestra in the summer at IU, Indiana University, I would sit right in front of Harvey, and I'm playing contrabassoon. He's playing tuba, and he'd get up and say, "Yeah, man, low power." But later on, he had a chance to encourage me, and he said, "Really, Ray, you got to go to New York." He says, "With all the instruments you can play and the different styles you can cover, you need to go to New York City. That's where you really prove yourself." And, you know, I really started thinking about that, and it really started to get really exciting to me when I got the call from BYU. And I had to work through that a little bit, but I decided, no, I need to go to BYU. So here I was, and then so much of that work came here. we were recording movie backgrounds and jingles for all over the world and all kinds of things here at LA East in Salt Lake. And Lex Diaz-Avedo was bringing in work. I did the Sandlot at Studio One. That was Lex's studio. We did. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Sandlot, but that's one of the many movies that I've played on the background, and a lot of people know that one. And little kid goes out that couldn't play much ball, so he went out to practice with his dad, and there's these little clarinet solos and so on underneath that. That's me. And all the lead alto stuff on that movie is me. I wish I could claim that wonderful tenor work at the front. They took that back to LA. I think that was Dan Higgins, wonderful player, but I can't claim that. But when the heavyset catcher kid hits this home run and the ball goes way up, and I go, whee, on the clarinet as the ball comes down. So it's been a lot of cool opportunities to record on those things. And that's one that I've recorded on a lot of movies, but that's one that I think everybody, well, another one you might recognize. I didn't play on the movie on Lost World. I think it was the third Jurassic Park movie, but I did play in the orchestra on the trailer, and they needed some contrabassoon stuff that went it was just really fast, really low. It was actually impossible to play it on a real contrabassoon. And I was sitting next to the contrabassoon player on the session. I was a clarinet player on the session, and I played it on the wind controller on the WX7. I was playing a contrabassoon stop through a Proteus 3, I think it was, but no, it's Proteus 1. Anyway. And so I've been on a number of those trailers and things like that too. But anyway, I love recording. In fact, now I have a recording studio in my house here, and we continue to record CDs, and I could.
Let me just assure our listeners that we're still talking to Ray Smith, and yes, he does all these things and has done all these things, and there's only one Ray Smith. I mean, you're an amazing cat, and there's one other area that we want to talk about, and that's your area as a clinician, an adjudicator, and an author. What do you see in the educational jazz field today, and how do you visualize the future?
I see a lot of growth. I mean, when I think back to what the level was we were playing in high school, I think that we're so much past that and in the high schools today. And I also think back to when I first came back to Utah and came to BYU. That's almost 40 years ago now, but I was adjudicating and listening to bands, and it's like, wow, these bands are getting better. But now they're really better. They're so much better. I really think that it's the school bands that are preserving jazz in a lot of ways. I mean, not only are we spawning the beginnings of a lot of the important players in those school things, but probably far more important, we're developing audience. Those kids that are going through those bands are going to be the audience for jazz for years and years to come. And that's exciting to me because this is a wonderful music. We don't want it to die out. There was a day when this was the pop music of the day, and it's not now. We have all the other kinds of music now that are vying for a lot of attention. And so many people do not know the riches and wonders of this jazz music that we love so much. And I'm grateful for the school programs that are carrying that forth. I'm glad for the book that you've written, this Red Zone. It's a great book to be used with the band in the trenches. I have a student in a junior high school north of here who is using that with the band, and it's working really well. They just love opportunity for students today. I mean, we have high school students that are out playing anything that would have happened in college years ago. And we have high school students even that are sounding quite professional. You know? Went to Indianapolis, they did the rehearsals and all that, and then they didn't get to do the concert because of this virus starting. But he's playing so well. Plays excellent tenor and alto. And In fact, I've got one of my students that's playing lead tenor in the North Texas 1 O'Clock Lab Band right now, which is quite cool. We've had a number of students go through the band, but this is the first time lead tenor chair. That's pretty cool. Really proud of Andrew. I forgot to get it over here. I do have a book too that I feel like can be of value. This is the Real Jazz Pedagogy book, available on Amazon, places like that. And this is not written for use in the trenches with the kids. It's not the same book. It doesn't compete with Dick's book at all, but it is, I think, a helpful book to the music educator, to the jazz educator. There are a lot of ideas, teaching ideas, problem-solving ideas, and so on in that book. And I have a YouTube channel that's coordinated to it with videos that help to demonstrate some of the things. And that channel keeps growing, and I've still got a lot of video of me out and working in the public schools with bands that I need to edit through and get on there, actually solving problems out in the real trenches. But I think that's also, and there's so many valuable resources that we have now. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, there was one book that had been published by a credible publishing company, Prentice Hall, and that was Jerry Coker's book called Improvising Jazz. I read it 4 times when I was in high school, while I was still, and there was just not anything else you could get like that, you know. And you had to kind of go underground just find anything else. Now there's so much stuff that's available. And I appreciate how Jamie's kind of brought it all together in one place. You go to jazzbooks.com, you can find everything you need in one place. You know, it's just phenomenal. So, so much available.
That's really an important book, and I know that it is doing well in the educational field. We have another question which you might be able to share with us. What do you see as the most important keys to developing young jazz musicians?
Yeah. Well, I feel that like in the school bands, there are 4 things that you got to take care of to create a superior jazz ensemble. And one of those is just playing the instruments, you know, the tone production and intonation and all this stuff that really isn't different from what you have to do with the concert band. It's the same kind of stuff. But second, we got to teach style, and we've got to get into swing style, especially because I think that's our common practice period in a way for what we have to, as we move to other styles. And then we've got to teach, we've got to deal with the rhythm section. So many of the music educators out there, it's not their fault. I mean, it's an indictment on higher education that we don't prepare them better to deal with the rhythm section. But so many of them haven't even played in a group with the rhythm section, let alone dealt with how to deal with the rhythm section instruments. And you've got to deal with that. And then improvisation, you've got to deal with that. Those are the 4 areas that cannot be left undone. How you get to those things, I mean, most important, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, Dick, is listening. The kids have to hear the music. How do you copy something you've never heard? And I agree with Suzuki that the mother tongue approach, that you learn to play like you learn to talk, which is that you've got to hear and imitate. When do we learn how to notate it, or how to read the notation, the symbolic representation of those sounds? You know, years after the fact sometimes. You know, we learn to talk. These little kids can talk clear as a bell by 2 years old. They're complete sentences and they understand what they're saying. And yet we don't learn how to read those words until, you know, 3 or 4 years later or so. And I really think that we've got this kind of backwards in music education where we want the kids to learn to play by reading. It really isn't the way they learn. They learn by listening, by imitating and copying. And I think the wise band director is to get them listening and transcribing and playing along by ear with things and so on. I think maybe the real answer to that is that most of our education, music education over the years has become really left brain. It's like we've tried to turn the music into a visual art, and we're very left-brained, and there is a certain amount of mathematical. Our theory and everything is the math part of music, and there is a lot of left brain in music, and I think we need that. But I think we've completely left undone this right brain development, and it's so difficult to do that because it's so much easier in an academic setting to give stuff you can give on a handout and test people on what they memorized and so on. How do you deal with? Okay, I want you to transcribe. Okay, well, you can have them bring back a transcribed solo, maybe play the solo. That's good. What if you say, I want you to go out and play with the radio 2 hours each night? how do you evaluate whether they did that or how well they did that? There's some educational problems, or at least academic problems, with trying to deal with this right brain growth. But I feel like we've got to not neglect that, because the music is still an oral art, and we have to get the ears involved. For most of us, the first time we're really asked to involve our ears is in our college dictation or sight singing class. And then it's really difficult. Nobody's ever asked us to do that kind of stuff before. But I had been doing that in high school because of these summer jazz camps. I was doing a lot of playing by ear, and I'd play 2 hours a night with the radio on different stations and stuff. And I didn't have a saxophone teacher, as I told before, so I just did what I was told, had been told would be a good idea, and I just did it the best I could, And I'd play along with the recording, and maybe I'm playing along with Charlie Parker, and I'm trying to. Of course, I can't compete with Bird, but I'm hearing certain notes, and that's cool. And I'm grabbing a few things. Then when the piano solo comes up, that is like my play-along. And this was pre-play-along. The first Aerosolve stuff came a couple of years after this. But and then it's like, okay, can I keep trying to sound like Charlie Parker while I play over the piano solo? And, I don't think there's still a better way to learn than that. Despite all the books that we have and all the opportunities we have, we've got to get the kids involved with the right brain development process. I remember going into my room at night, I'd turn off the lights, be dark, and just play on my horn and see if I could play my emotions. No preset tune, no preset chord progression, just play the emotions that I was feeling. I think that did so much good for me. But it's a very imprecise way of practicing. And how do you give an assignment like that? And then how do you evaluate whether it was done? And how do you give a grade? I think this has caused part of these problems. But I think we have to get right brain and left. In that field of right and left brain thinking, if you're using both hemispheres, you're called double dominant. And I think that's what my goal has been to develop double dominant students. Students who can use their left brain, they understand theory, they can spell chords, and they know scales, and they can examine a chord progression and provide all the Roman numerals. But I also want them to be able to respond by ear, and I want them to have an intuitive sense of what to do. All that work for me has paid off in so many different. One example, I'm thinking of this happened more than once, but a specific recording example. I went up, they said we want saxophone solos on a CD for the singer. So I got there, went in the control room, started to take my horn out, and they said, "Oh, you're here, Ray. Let's show you what we're doing here." And they played the tune from the top, and they said, "Now, in the first 4 measures, why don't you put a sax lick in here? This is the intro. Now, just lay out during the first statement of the melody. Right here, we left 8 measures for a saxophone solo. And after that, just sparse fills with the singer. Well, on the end here, could you do something similar to what you did on the top? A lick on the end to kind of tie it together." Yeah, okay. So I go out, put the headphones on. The recordings, the singer's already on the recording, and so is the rhythm section. On this particular tune, I don't think I could have even named the field that the rhythm section was playing with. I don't know what it was, but I intuitively knew what to do with it. And there was no chart, and there was nobody even told me what key the thing was in. And it was all here and here. I just had to hear it and feel it. And it came off really well. But I've had to respond to a lot of things like that. And I think that we're not letting the kids have enough of those kind of opportunities. I think that really helps to build kids.
You are a master musician and a master teacher. And we've made us all smarter through this whole interview. Now, let me ask you to make us even better. Would you play something for us, Ray?
I thought I should play something from the big band, and I started looking just while we were off air for a minute, and I couldn't find it. I do have all right. This is a project that I just did. Let me see if I can find it here. This is a project for a singer. We recorded here at my studio. I actually recorded it and mixed it, and then recorded this saxophone. Here's a ballad. I'll just give you a touch of this. Oh, you know what? Let me share the screen so you can hear this better.
Evening summer breeze, warbling.
Take it up a little bit. Oh, shoot.
Telegraph cable.
I did a flute solo on this one. This has got Joe Lano on the guitar, a wonderful guitar player. Played with Sinatra and Lena Horne, everybody. And Joe wrote the arrangement on this. Get over a little bit far.
Bumping like someone in love.
Yeah, sorry, I'm bumping it up a little bit. Maybe one more little snippet from a different style. It's the Billy Joel tune. Get over to the tenor solo here. Coming up right here.
It was so easy.
Try to be versatile stylistically whenever I have to respond to something like that. I did find this in the box account here. What I was looking for is I've got some recordings that we did at a wonderful concert in Santo Domingo. No, it was in Santiago, Dominican Republic, and I can't find it. But here's just a snippet from when we played with the New York Voices. So this is not a mixed CD quality. This is just recorded at the concert live. But I'll play a little bit of this with the big band.
Welcome to New York Voices.
That's about as loud as I got. It looks like. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. This is with a really young band, a lot of freshmen in this band.
Yes, it's all right. It's all right with me.
Yeah, I think I might have played on this one. Let's see if this is a Dorman meter scatting. You don't have me up? I think that's me, but there we go.
It's the wrong time and wrong place. Though your face is charming, it's the wrong face.
Anyway, cool concert. I never play out with the band if I feel like I'm taking somebody's solo away with them, from them. But if I feel like I got everybody adequately involved, then I'll play with the band still. I like to play sometimes. So I don't know. Maybe that's plenty. That's probably more than you
That's
wanted.
fabulous, Ray. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. This has been one of the most interesting and informative interviews that we've had the pleasure of doing. I know that the listeners will benefit from your wise words and your beautiful playing. And if they didn't know before, they know now, Dr. Ray Smith. He's the man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on this so much. And I wish you well with the book. I think it's providing a great service to the schools, and I hope that they'll latch on to it.
Thank you so much.
And Bob, thank you too. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for being a part of this. To our viewers, we appreciate you joining us today and for being a part of Jazz Zone Together. We hope you found the presentation of real value. We hope you'll join us for future episodes. In the meantime, please stay safe and please keep making music.